What's up, guys? It's Drummer Miles here, and we are back with episode 2 of Building a Better Boom Bap Beat. This episode is going to be called Pad Placement and Finger Drumming Basics. I'm not going to waste too much time up front here. I just want to let you know this episode won't go too deep into the effects chain and the drum rack. That's going to be a separate episode by itself. This is mainly going to be about how I like to lay out my drum kits, how I like to use them, and different things I do in Program Edit to make sure that they respond well. A big theme across this whole lesson is that we're all different. We're all snowflakes, and the way you do it is not going to be the way I do it, and the way that's most comfortable for you is not going to be the way it's most comfortable for me.
Who are you? And what do you want?
So everybody has their own way of doing things. So I highly recommend you check out a bunch of different guys doing it. Look at what their setup is like. All I can really tell you is what I've found to be the best for me and my preferences. I also just want to say how much I appreciate the feedback from the first episode. You guys are awesome, and I hope that this series is helpful. All right, so I'm going to show you how I like to set up my drum kits for comfortable playing. And this is just based on my own personal preference. We are all like snowflakes. We are all different. Don't think that this is an ironclad rule of how you have to set up your drums. It's definitely not. I'm going to kill two birds with one stone, and while I show you where I place my drums, I'm going to also colorize them so that you can see how I like to colorize. And I do suggest, if you have a piece of hardware that allows you to do it, I suggest you get into the habit of colorizing them. It just is another subconscious cue and helps with your muscle memory. So let's see, I've got this little drum kit here. I'm going to go to menu, and I'm going to go to pad color. And I'm going to use fixed. The like dim and bright velocity are kind of fun, especially for like live stuff or videos, because you can see them triggering as you hit them. I'm going to go to fixed because I think that'll be the most clear on the camera. And I'm going to go to empty pads dim, and I'm going to go to single pads, right? As opposed to just doing the whole block one color. So let me go to purple, which is what I usually use for my kick drum, like low end, dark color. And I'm going to have a kick here, and I'm going to have a kick here. On either pad 1 and on both pad 1 and pad 4, I have the same kick. Why is that? I feel that it gives me a lot more speed when I'm moving around the kit, and I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. I usually use yellows and oranges for hi-hats and shakers, so I'm going to go yellow for my hi-hat and my other hi-hat, which is above my other kick. So I have a hi-hat. I have the same hi-hat here and here. And then I'm going to do that for my shaker as well, which is right up here on pad 8. And I'm going to go ahead and go a little darker yellow, and I'm going to go ahead and put that on pad 7, which is my open hi-hat. And then I'm going to go a little further orange and put it on pad 12, which is where I like to put like a ride cymbal or maybe some other secondary percussion. So that's what I've got there. Now we're going to go to the blue, and that's going to be pad 2, which is my main loud snare. And then I'm going to go a little lighter blue to the pad right above it, pad 6. And that's going to be a clap usually, or a snap, something so that as I'm going, I can embellish my snare by hitting both at once, if I want to. And then I'm going to go to green, which is usually what I use for my toms, or congas, or hand percussion, or anything like that. And that's going to be pad 9, 10, and 11. As you can hear, those are going down in note in order. Do. A lot of guys don't put toms or don't put hand drum, stuff like that. But like I have a drum background, and I kind of like to have them there, depends on the program, depends on what I'm doing and how I want to do it. So then I have a red, which I'm going to usually use for my crashes, which I'm going to put at pad 15 and pad 16. And you could argue that it's easier to have them on 13 and 16. But I don't feel cramped having them in the corner there, and I like to keep that separated. I find if you have them split and then other stuff in the middle, you're going to be triggering other things accidentally. And so then I'm going to go to pink, or one of these pink colors, for pad 14, which is an effects, which in this case is a nice little chime. So then I'm going to use a gray or a white for pad 13, which in this instance has a little melody loop on it, so that I can show you some things with that later. So I've got this little Rhodesy loop. Very nice. So I'm going to make that white or gray, just something that stands out from the pack so I don't accidentally hit it when I don't want to. All right, so that's how I usually like to color my basic layout of a kit. And that's how I lay out my basic layout of a kit. Now, there's a lot of other stuff that has to happen in order for this to function well. Generally, the default for an MPC and for most of these samplers is to have the polyphony on each single pad to be 1 and to be mono. So you want to change that. So I'm going to go Menu, Program Edit, and I'm going to go to the Master tab, which is the first tab here. And right here on the Master Polyphony, usually for every kit, I'm going to scroll that all the way to the left and use Poly on the whole kit. That's telling me that individual notes will be able to trigger at the same time. Now here on this same master page, I've got my closed hi-hat at number 3, and I'm going to mute target down here on the bottom. You could do the same thing on any DAW with mute groups, things like that. Any modern DAW will be able to do mute groups. You'll just have to look up how to do it in your particular DAW if you're not on MPC. But right here, you just go to Program, Master, and you mute target right here. So you select the pad you want to be running with, pad 3, which is my closed hi-hat, and I'm going to say mute target A7, which is my open hi-hat right above it. So now you can see that my closed hi-hat will mute my open hi-hat. See what I'm saying? Now, why don't I apply that to pad 5, which has the same hi-hat sound? The reason is pad 5 is basically there as a fail-safe, or for when I'm playing a faster beat. So for example, if you see what I'm saying, having pad 5 there is a comfortable place to drop that middle finger if you are occupied with the bass on your index finger. And if you're trying to get, you know, if you're trying to get a lot of motion, I find it helps to have that extra hi-hat there. However, if that hi-hat is also muting your open hi-hat, you can often run into problems. Essentially, it's because when I'm at a faster speed and pad 5 is becoming my fallback to double up my hi-hat pattern, it becomes very inconvenient if that one is also muting your open hi-hat. We're going to now slide all the way over to the LFO modulation tab in Program Edit. And you'll see up in the right corner, we've got pad polyphony. So that's the polyphony for the individual pad that you have selected. And again, make sure, like we talked about last episode, make sure you don't have all selected. You have current selected. So I'm going to set my kicks to mono. Now why? I mean, you could easily set your kicks to poly, and it's not a problem. However, if I have a kick layered with a long 808, I really don't want multiple stacked layers of that same 808 hitting. So your snare, now this depends on your snare, and it probably depends on your software and your hardware and how much you're working your hardware. But I usually will just set my snare to poly. You could set it to 3 or 4, and then you probably won't have any triggering issues. But I'm a drummer, and I like to do, fills. I just like to have the responsiveness of full poly on the snare. The clap, above the snare, you could do it. I'll probably just do it on 2. So that if I double stroke it accidentally or whatever, it doesn't silence it. Basically, the problem with having poly on one of these louder sustained hits is that if you accidentally tap the pad on your way up, it'll play a very quiet version of it, and it'll mute the one before it. See what I'm saying? So you could accidentally mute the end of your sample, and you don't really want that. The hi-hat, same reason. I'm going to throw that on poly. Also, your hi-hat's usually pretty short, so it's not really a problem. Pad 5, I'm going to throw that on poly also. Pad 8, it's a tambourine, it's a shaker. It really depends on what you got there, but I'm going to throw that on like 2 or 3, so that it doesn't do that silence itself problem, but it still doesn't end up being a huge stack of them if I play too many. Same with the ride. I'll usually go about 3, 4, so I could get just enough. That's usually my test. My test for the ride is to do a little spang-a-lang, which is what this jazz pattern is called. So 3, 4, something like that for the ride. Toms also, same as the snare. You want the toms not to stack on top of themselves to where they sound silly, but you don't want them to mute themselves accidentally. So I will usually set my toms also to at least like 3 or 4. And you'll have to adjust that based on different types of toms. Like if you have a tom that's got a really long decay, you probably want to have it on mono or on something like that. So I'm going to put each of those to 3, let's say. And then I feel comfortable. I can play it out and do what I need to do. So my crashes, I will usually still just leave on mono. And that can be a problem if you want. Maybe you want to do it too. But you sometimes want them to kill each other because it's more dramatic. A lot of times in hip-hop, you'll hear at the end, they have that double crash sound, you know? At the end of a chorus or a bridge. That 2 crash, you know, an early crash and a crash on the 1. So if it's on mono, that sounds pretty satisfying. If it's on poly, it's not quite as satisfying. See, it doesn't interrupt the one before. So, you know, you'll have to play around with how you want to do it. You'll have to play around with how you want to do it based on what your circumstance is. But for now, I'm just going to leave those on mono. Then I've got my effects, which I'll also leave my effects on mono. Same reason, I don't need the chimes to stack over and over again. And then I'm also going to put this on. My little loop, I'm also going to put on mono. Now you can set your loops inside your drum program to clip programs. You can split, clip, and one shot. You know, you can have this loop every time you can, if you hit it, you can just have it loop. But right now I just have it as a one shot, you know, so you could loop it along with your drumming and hit it every 4 bars. Okay, so we've gone over how I like to lay out my basic drum kit. We've gone over how I generally colorize it. And we've gone over how I like to do the polyphony. Now, another point I'd like to make at this point is I never quantize when I'm playing my drums. I just think it takes away a lot of the humanization. However, many great producers throughout time had never learned to finger drum, and everything is programmed, and the drums sound fantastic. And I'm still planning on going over a lot of the techniques that you would use to program them using note repeat and using things like that. But I think that's going to be a little later on because personally I prefer to play my drums out. So I'm going to do that first. Okay, let me show you how we can use what we've done to create a few basic beats. This is just like a real basic kind of De La Tribe, 90s, Second Golden. Diggable Planets uses this a lot. You know, think of like cool like that, rough like that, high like that, fly like that. Basically the same beat, same tempo. There's a lot of tracks with that same beat and that same tempo. That's a great one to go with. Same tempo, you could do that like Drunken Dilla kind of style, you know? So now I'm going to speed up a little more, and this is kind of like a, you know, Clyde, Stubblefield, like Jabbo Stark kind of inspired thing, like a 70s JB's funk beat. You'll see with this example how I make use of pad 3 and pad 5 as alternating hi-hats. You're going to start hearing some artifacts in this loop, but that's all right. I'm going to speed it up to 120 and show you how you can do like a basic fake Latin, like reggaeton kind of beat. And then, of course, you've got like a basic disco-y kind of house beat, whatever you want to call it. If you want to incorporate that ride more, there's like the classic. You hear this on a lot of like J. Rue the Damage, stuff like that. BDP uses this a lot, except it's like a much more synthesized sounding ride cymbal. Like a little swing on that ride. See how when it cuts itself off, it's much more dramatic. Okay, I think those beats give you a good idea of why I like to set it up the way I like to set it up. Thank you guys so much for coming back for episode 2. I really appreciate it. As usual, I'm not going to strong arm you, but subscribe if you feel like subscribing. And I really want your feedback, and I really want to hear what you guys think of the series and what other topics you're hoping I'll cover as we go along here. Thank you so much. Peace and love, and as always, be good to each other.